Welcome to What People Miss. In this episode, I get to sit down with Dr. Chris Smith and discuss respectability politics. Hi, my name is Cordelia Gaffar, and I am your host. I call myself the ultimate joy goddess, and I invite you to choose joy and pleasure so that you savor your life. The conversations on What People Miss are based on the quote by Mozart where he says, "The music is not in the notes, but in the silence between them." Dr. Chris N. Smith, they, them, is a queer, non-binary, and non-monogamous scholar whose academic work centers BIPOC intellectual traditions while addressing systemic marginalization and intra-group discrimination in education, religion, sexuality, gender, and society. They have worked extensively with public and private organizations to implement and enhance JEDI measures in emergency management, human capital, risk management, contracting, and workforce development. Additionally, they lead SUSIA Baltimore, an intentional decolonized play and networking community focused on transformative justice, harm reduction, intersectional safety, and BIPOC unity, and Baltimore, Maryland. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, Chris. Welcome to What People Miss.
Pleasure to be here. I'm excited for it all. Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited that you said yes to having this conversation with me about the roots of respectability politics, and I welcome your expertise when it comes to the way people behave, right? And we're partnering together, and I'll bring in the somatic side of it. So, in your work, what have you noticed are the ways that people most commonly shrink themselves?
Well, I think it's important to frame it from a historical context. Politics of respectability or respectability politics is a form of survival. And this impacts everybody. Every culture, every civilization, every society, every region, they have norms that they feel it comes with operating in groups, you know? You have norms that in order to be a part of this group, you need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Now, when it comes to particularly people who have been underrepresented, marginalized, or directly discriminated against, it is a form of survival. So in the African American context, coming from being, slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights movement, and then until today, we have had to operate in performative ways for physical safety, for economic safety, for emotional safety, for mental safety, and the like. So I see it show up in not wanting to rustle the feathers of other individuals. As a African American male, it was not being too loud unless I'm playing sports. It was not dressing in a certain way. It was not talking in a certain manner. It was being seen as of utility, or in order to be loved, I have to be of use. I have to provide. I have to be the, man of I have to do all of that. And it builds such stress when, as we know, human beings are very diverse and we're very intricate and we're very nuanced. And then you add on the fact that it's systemically supported. So if you see an individual that doesn't follow the system, we see it with systemic norms. We see it with the LGBTQIA community, particularly trans individuals with gender. We see even norms around how races are supposed to operate. The simple blacks are athletic, whites are powerful, Asians are smart, so on and so forth. And if you don't fit into those scripts, you are made fun of, outcast, isolated, and it really has such an impact not only on the psyche and sense of self-worth, but it has a massive impact on our bodies as well.
Yeah. And, in my work, what I see most often is people will clench, right?
Hmm.
Different body armor and different bands across the body. Um, most commonly, you'll notice it in the jawline and the eyes. That's what you can actually see when you look at a person physically. But if you pay even closer attention, you'll see it in the shoulders and in the general posture as
Mm-hmm.
well. Yeah. And of course, there's um, the long-term effects on the body systems internally that are obviously not seen at all. So I want to go back to something you said about what we see in marginalized groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, when it comes to code switching,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these people that haven't mastered the art of code switching, those are the targeted ones.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some ways that within those groups, right? You said that if you don't fit the norm for your group, then you're ostracized and outcast. So what are some of the things that you'll see within the groups that happen?
Oh, so, whew. And so within the groups, like intragroup or interracial, intra ethnic, even within the LGBTQIA, because there are scripts in order to be seen as a proper lesbian. There are scripts to be seen as a proper gay, a proper trans, a proper bi, a proper. You'll see with these scripts, again, one of the biggest forms are either direct, like confrontation with these individuals, or isolation because they do not know how to take the nuances of what these things are. Like, I'm glad that I traveled around a lot of the world, but I dedicated myself to traveling around the United States early in my 20s up until like my early 30s and seeing Black communities in every single state. I made that my mission. And that was really brought out with me from going to Howard University, which was the first time I actually really got involved with Black individuals or African American individuals, people from the African diaspora, whatever terminology you want to use. And realizing that though we all may share a systemic racial designation, our experiences are vastly different. So you'll hear, like, let's say there's a African American from Harlem, New York, right?
Right.
And they'll go down to Alabama. It's going to be hard for them to fit in because there's different norms around speaking, eye contact, what it means to be polite, what it means to show respect, and all these things. Now there are undercurrents of similarity, but just the basic tone that a New Yorker may use, and vice versa, may offend somebody, and then they would then be looked at as rude. They wouldn't be invited to cookouts. They wouldn't be, So
Yeah,
yeah,
I can really relate to that. So
yeah.
like a personal story here,
Mhm,
I was born in the North, and just when I was starting first grade, we moved to the South,
mhm,
right? And so, um, and we went from like ethnically diverse, I guess, less Black neighborhood, right, to an all Black neighborhood in the South. And yeah, there was they had a lot of comments about my accent, right?
mhm,
Um, they had issues with color. So like,
mhm,
you know, in Black families, there is a range of hues that you'll see
yeah,
amongst siblings. And so my immediate older sister could pretty much pass for white. And so there was an issue of colorism with that, which that was my first experience ever. I didn't even
mhm,
know what that was. I was like, what is
right,
happening now? Um, and then, just on from there, I just continued to not conform. And so I definitely resonate when you talk about the isolation factor. Um, because it's like I,
yeah,
I I could never catch a break, and I never, as you can hear, got a Southern accent either. So
mhm.
yeah. Although I try from time to time.
See, my Southern accent just comes out when I'm around other Southern people.
Mm.
It will just spew out. But I think another thing that's very interesting, and I remember it from childhood, it was the be seen and not heard mentality. And this is a generational thing. It was just a generational norm in a lot of ways. But children are taught that their worth is about how obedient they are instead of expressive and questioning. And still, you see that in some cultures and some or some ethnicities or some regions that exist in the United States, or the fact that directness in some ways can feel dangerous. If you speak directly, if you speak strongly, or if you tell the truth, you might lose love, you might lose employment, you might lose housing, or community. Like honesty, as much as people we speak about how great honesty is, when you have to understand that there are cultural scripts for how honest you should be. And I run up a lot of that because I am non-monogamous and open in various ways. I love to be honest and transparent about my actions and my movements. But I've also found that in relationships, for individuals that aren't in that same script, it seems as inconsiderate or as you're not considering the other person's feelings. Or, so it's difficult because respectability politics play into our second to second interactions. And we have to continually surveil ourselves internally. And that can cause so much stress and even the doubt or thought like, did I do that right? Did I do that? Like even by when I said, did I do that right? Immediately my traps tightened and so did my arms. Immediately. And my back, Lord, like I have to get so many massages.
Yeah. You gotta take care of your body, you know? So
Mhm,
all these things that we experience to fit in and to, um, I guess we're using the word shrink, um,
mhm,
to to be palatable, cause us some aftercare issues, right? And so
mhm,
that's what I'm calling self-nurturing. Um, Ideally, as you're going through things, you will allow yourself to be fully present with breath,
mhm,
and just slow down and really feel into your body to see what you are willing to and capable of engaging with as far as conversations and interactions, and whatever you cannot, you know, this is where a form of self nurturing is to just speak up and say, advocate for yourself.
mhm,
Can
exactly.
we make right? Let's make another time to complete this conversation. I have to do some research. You can say whatever is acceptable and also true, right? Because
Mhm,
that wouldn't be a lie to say that you need to do research if you're because the research in this case would be the inner inquiry on how to uh to successfully come through this interaction. And even to your point about honesty, it's like sometimes you may have to research. It's like, who am I dealing with? Like, who is this
mhm,
person? How can I communicate effectively with them, in a way that will preserve relationship if that's what you want to do, or end relationship if that's what you want to do?
mhm. Yeah. And it's the fact that self-nurturing is a point of rebellion. It's like political and spiritual rebellion. You're choosing to nourish yourself. It's a form of therapy, and it is also a form of like creative advancement. And it can be pleasing. It's pleasurable when you self-nurture. And it's not self-indulgence. You can actually like repair your nervous system when you are expressing in your one acknowledging that in this moment and in this place that I have this pressure of respectability politics on me and I'm going to choose to set boundaries. Because the one thing that respectability politics we don't often well, we talk about it, but I've never heard it connected in this way. The amount of abuse that an individual can engage in or engage with, be a part of, or be a victim of because of politics of respectability. I remember in so many instances in my life where it's kind of just like the group think, where people would pick on somebody or people would talk about somebody or so on and so forth. And people would feel pressure to join in on that. And I see it with adults to this day. You see it all over Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 even in conversations at bars, hookah lounges, smoke lounges. If you do not jump in and say the same things that the group are, so it's like a sense of acquiesce, like you're acquiescing, even though you may not agree, even though it may not feed you in any type of way. So it limits your ability to set boundaries for yourself, which can be extremely traumatic physically, emotionally, mentally, sexually as well. I know there are scripts for me as a male. What does it mean to be a respectably sexual male? What is my role? How am I supposed to show up in those romantic situations? And if I don't show up in that way, I can be made fun of. I can be questioned. I can be isolated. I can be seen as less than what my gender is supposed to do or supposed to be. But if I do subject myself to what I'm supposed to be doing in those situations, it can be deeply depressing. It can be deeply isolating. It can be deeply like loss of joy. Like you can actually lose excitement around the things. Even in this applies to everything, whether abuser or abused, whether this or that. Something that really caught my mind, and I read it. Actually, no, I didn't read it. I was listening to a video, and it was about slavery. It was about race. It was about just forms of discrimination as a whole. And there was individual who stood up and said, "Have we ever done a study on the people that partook in discriminatory acts that did not feel it was right, but felt like they had to fit in, or they would be ostracized?"
Hmm. That would be an interesting study to conduct and to see the results of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like those we call allies now that finally woke up and like, I really don't want to do it. What has been their experiences with not fitting in with the norm of being this discriminatory person? Have they lost family? Have they been isolated? Have they felt threats of violence and mental, emotional, physical, or sexual violence?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, people get abused, and I
Yeah.
think that's a good use of the word, because we don't think of bias or prejudice or any of these things as abuse. It's just a
Hmm.
thing.
Right.
And actually, these are forms of emotional abuse, um, and that result in mental abuse, of course. And I feel like that's overlooked, because what I say a lot of times is I help women who have experienced emotional abuse at work or at home.
Hmm.
And so in my life, having been a female executive, like the only Black female executive on a team where everybody else was a white male, right? There, you would think it would be respectable to, just respect another executive, but no, because of
Right.
optics, I was
Hmm.
less than, right? And so, as a form of rebellion to advocate for myself, that's where self nurturing began, with when they wanted to spring meetings on me, or, you need to produce this report in an unreasonable amount of time. I didn't cave. I said, well, I have obligations and this wasn't on my schedule. And so I'll get it to you in 48 hours, even
Right.
if they want it the same day. It's like, no, absolutely not. And a lot of women that do that, or they will not do that, to your point, because they don't want to lose their job and they have to prove that they're better. And
Hmm.
just to kind of add a little bit of animation to our conversation, we both saw Zootopia, for example, yesterday, right?
Yes, we
And
did.
this makes me think of the bunny, right?
Yeah.
She, she was, what is her name? Hobbs, right?
Mhm.
She was overperforming to prove that, she was the best, that she belongs. And that they were a great team, her and her partner, the fox. When they were, uh, her individual actions were a form of dysfunction, like a trauma drive response. And that's what a lot of Black women will do,
Mhm.
and of course, anyone that feels pressured in a situation like that, it's always prove yourself, show that you're better, show that you belong. And the belonging is in the nurturing yourself by just behaving like you belong, by meeting your
Right.
own requirements and advocating for them. And that's actually the, I call it joy drive instead of
Yeah.
trauma drive, right? So if
Yeah.
you're coming from your joy, it's like, no, I'm an expert and I know how much time is required to do what you're asking me to do.
Mhm.
So what you're asking is unreasonable. That's not happening, but I'm going to do this, you know? And that's all that's really required in situations like that. So rather than to cave or to shrink yourself, the the thing to do is to advocate through self-nurturing in the moment.
Yeah. And so I had two of my favorite characters from that movie. Um, the first is the snake, the snake.
Hmm.
The representation of somebody who holds to so much hope and joy amidst their family being wrongfully blamed and stripped of all safety and consideration to still want to have that outlook like, hey, we're going to win throughout the entire movie and actually helped the bunny a lot. Like, hey,
Yes,
we're going
yes.
to
Very
win.
supportive, funny.
Yeah. Like we're going to win. Don't worry. And also the permission to hug. Like it was so
I love that.
yeah.
That's
He was
the authentic consent that they threw into because that's another thing. We didn't talk about
mhm,
this, but children, right?
mhm.
There's an ageism
Yes.
issue. We
Yeah.
assume that children don't get body autonomy, which
Yeah.
leads to pedophilia and a lot of, essay abuse with children. Um, because it's just like, well, you're supposed to hug, Uncle so and so or Aunt so and so. And even if, like, children's bodies know, right?
Hmm.
I've had my children just be standing there completely rigid, and I'd be like, okay, baby, you don't have to hug, you know?
Hmm.
But culturally, right? Because they're also half Bengali, and that culture, like you said, kids are seen, not heard.
Hmm.
Like, nope, you do whatever we say. So my rebellion against allowing my kids to do whatever was accepted and expected, kind of made us outcast, me in
Hmm.
particular outcast, um, but you have to advocate, for your kids. You must.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I remember, and I hear this across multiple ethnicities and races, the idea that, yo, if your family member wants to hug you or so on and so forth, it's the respectable thing to do. And if you didn't, other family members, parents would, why didn't you hug them? What? That's your uncle. That's your aunt. What's wrong with you? So on and so forth. So they would reach, and that would build a sense of appeasement against their own self like security and
Yeah.
safety,
Yeah.
and yet can transition as into adulthood in so many negative ways or non in so many unsafe ways when
Yeah.
people will just appease because that is what they've been taught to do, whenever they express discontent or nervousness, um something that always comes to me, and it kind of annoys me when people do this all the time because I'm not this type of person. like I often think about like what emotions do we apologize for the most quickly?
Mm. Happiness, sadness, anger. Well, maybe we don't apologize for anger, but we do hide ourselves.
Right. I find myself consistently, if I ever get upset, right, or express anger, I find myself apologizing so quickly because I don't want to be seen as a threat to anybody.
Is that because you're male-bodied or because you're
Absolutely.
black and male-bodied?
Black and male bodied and strong. And I'm like, I'm fit.
Yeah,
So I
you're
know that,
built.
yeah. So I know that if I express anger in any type of way, particularly in a system where that is a trope, I then, for my own safety and respectability, have to and I could be completely justified for this anger. Completely justified. But I have to shrink that feeling in order to be safe. And then it gets me to thinking, who benefits from that? Because it's sure enough not me.
Yeah, your blood pressure doesn't, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and I would have to say that that is also something that happens in the body. If you're constantly on guard, who do I have to be in this setting? Who am I dealing with? Well, let me just go ahead and be that person that they're
Hmm.
expecting me to be, right? And show them that I'm safe. I I would say that I have less problems with that.
Hmm.
Um, my biggest issue is more invisibility, you know, um,
Hmm.
because previously when I wore hijab, I was more performative because
Right.
I felt like I had to be on guard because I know people are going to see my hijab and they're going to think that, I might be a threat, right? I was an obvious threat. But now that I don't wear hijab, people just kind of don't see me, right? And so it's a different kind of threat that I'm seen
Hmm.
as. It's kind of a threat, but insignificant. She's just a black woman. I'll just walk right in front of her. Or when I'm walking on the street, right? People will not move to one side. They'll assume that I'm going to move.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say invisibility. In your case, you're tall, you're thick, so you may do something like this. Whereas
Hmm.
I'm short and I have to do something like
You
this,
like this?
like stand up straight and walk, and be like, no,
Exactly.
I'm a whole yeah.
Like I can't even count the number of times where I have changed the pitch of my voice in public to just be like, "Oh, excuse me," and so people don't hear "excuse me," and then they get razzled. And I also realize that those are still a lot of those are based in such cultural differences that exist around loudness in the life. There are certain cultures that if you're loud, they have a whole entire emotional breakdown because they see loudness as danger.
Hmm.
And then they get traumatized and they're triggered. And it's kind of frustrating because my culture's not like that. We loud. Like we express, we yell, we'll run around. Um, particularly if we've taken in some libations, we will argue. But for individuals who have either had negative experiences with that because it's become abusive, or that it's just they're just used to quiet, it will completely frazzle them to the point where they'll try to reprimand you for doing something that really one has nothing to do with them, but they'll try to control your expression in order to appease their triggers.
Yeah. And I would say they also want to hamper your joy because ultimately that's what you're describing, black joy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But white joy is okay, right? Because
Mhm.
we've also been in settings where there have been extremely loud white women, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it was like no one was coming to say, "Shh, ma'am, can you,"
Exactly.
right? But
Because
had it been
yeah.
a group of Black women, it would have been like, "Are you ready to take
Hmm.
your check now?"
Yeah.
Little kids.
Exactly. And I'm gonna be honest. I am afraid of gaggles of drunk American white women.
Yeah,
As a
agree.
African American male,
Yes.
afraid. I will cross the street in order to not be around that. But
Yeah.
also have fun with your joy. But as long as your joy isn't replicating certain expressions towards other people that demean or fetishize. And
Yes.
I think that's where the boundary needs to be drawn. There's a difference between a joy that's truly internal and non disruptive, and then the types of joy or expression that are extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And I
For
don't think we've
example,
learned. Yeah, yeah.
look, eh, I mean, you being attacked by several drunk white women, or similarly, right? Me with white drunk men,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Definitely, when we think about my dimensions compared to a man, I would be in a lot more danger, you know?
yeah.
I mean, but that's relative, isn't it? Because,
Hmm. Structurally, I would be in danger.
yeah,
Systemically, I would be in danger.
yeah, yeah.
'Cause all
So
it
it's
takes is one, yeah,
different forms of danger, but it's danger nonetheless,
yeah,
you know? And it takes some advocating for self, like in your case, walking across the street.
or in the world of cell phones, pulling out a cell phone and recording the whole thing so that everybody knows I was minding my business.
Yes.
And but like it's really, it really, respectability politics are so entrenched in systemic issues and power.
Yes, definitely be a student of yourself.
Hmm.
And once you find out those places that need stretching, also find out those places that need release. Have
Hmm.
tantrums. Yes.
Absolutely.
Having a while you're on the floor, just roll over and just kick and scream like you're two 2 years old. Yes, we need to. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And I look forward to welcoming you back again on What People Miss, and continuing this conversation about self nurturing and respectability politics. Thank you for being attentive and present for this episode of What People Miss. I invite you to visit my website, cordeliagaffar.com, so that you can find tools and resources to support your transformational journey to self nurturing and feeling safe in your body so that you can choose joy and pleasure and savor your life. Until next week, later.